Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Daily Word Friday. We have completed another week, so glad you could join me for our time together as we continue our journey through our daily Word and what it means for us. And of course, my hope always has been from day one, my hope has always been that for me, and of course for you, that what we take from this daily Word, we apply it. You know, we see circumstances in our life, we see events happen, we have conversations with somebody, and my hope has always been that we would take this scripture, this little nugget that we've learned, maybe not today, but maybe something from yesterday or the day before, that is instilled in us, you know, and ingrained in us, so that we can then use it to live better, if you will, live more holy, if you will. H-O-L-Y, holy, and holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, whole. You know, and we live our lives in such a way that it makes a difference. And I hope that in all of these days that we've found a nugget here or there that's helped us, that's guided us in our lives. And, you know, if there's been a little nugget that we've gotten, then all of these days have been worth it as we've lived our lives together. So we end another week. Glad you could join me. Reminder, we'll worship on Sunday morning at 10:15. You're welcome to join us in person or, of course, here on Facebook Live. Join us as we hear from Jeremiah. Jeremiah, the less than willing prophet Jeremiah, who God says, look, Jeremiah, I called you. And Jeremiah says, man, I don't think so. I'm a child. And God says, but. And there is that big word in there, that three-letter word that's a big word. We're going to talk about that on Sunday morning. So hopefully you'll join us as we share in that conversation. But for today, it's from our scripture. It's from the prophet Habakkuk. And we hear these interesting words. Woe to him who says to wood, come to life. Out of lifeless stone, wake up. Can it give guidance? Is it covered with gold and silver? There is no breath in it. We've learned from history and from ancestors and even for us now, you know, that sometimes we found ourselves in history making statues out of wood. We found ourselves dependent on those kinds of things. You know, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Well, we talked about it when we were outside a week or so ago, that, you know, when the Israelites waited for the Ten Commandments, they got tired of waiting, so they built these golden calves because they found that in their lives they needed something to worship, and they got tired of waiting for Moses to come back. We control in our lives, really control, very few things, but what we really choose is, I think, who to trust, where to place our faith, what we decide to depend upon. And we have lots of choices in that, right? So in our culture today, you know, we have, unfortunately, allegiances to strange things, like politicians, like antiques, of course, you know, like all the things that we choose to accumulate. None of those are bad things. Well, the first thing, the politician thing, has turned out to be a bad thing, but none of those are bad things, except where do we place our trust? Where do we see God in our lives? We are called, you know, to put our faith, our trust, our hope in the Creator who we know as God. And to trust in God to move through our lives and to shape us and to mold us and to make us who we are. We realize, you know, at the end of the day, that the things that we hold the tightest often are like sand that goes through our fingers. They go away, money, accumulations, even our health, they go away. And in the end, they're just a piece of wood. And although we can't see God, like you're seeing me, God's handiwork is everywhere if we choose to see it. I look out the window of my office. It looks out the east. It overlooks Ohio Avenue, and it overlooks the grounds of the church. And it's a beautiful thing. And I marvel at its creation. The trees that are planted there, the tree that's planted in memory of my dad, it's growing like crazy. And I look out there. First thing I do is raise those blinds when I get here. I marvel at God's handiwork in our world. The opportunity for us, you and I, to trust God is foundational when we make choices then in the rest of our lives. And I think that's what's critical for us. We have before us so many choices to make in our life. They go on and on every day. Sometimes they're huge, gigantic choices. Sometimes they're small choices. But every day we have this plethora of choices in front of us. If we trust God, if our faith, if our hope is if our foundation is in God, if we're whole in God, then when we make the other choices in life, then they're made because we trust God. And I think we have a better way then to make those choices. And those choices then help us to find fulfillment in life. And I think that's true for us in all of our lives. I would hope for us that as we have moved and lived together in all of these days of a daily word, that we would continue first and foremost to trust in God, and then that helps us in the choices of life that we make as we move forward. And sometimes we just need that reminder, that the stuff that we have is like sand. Our faith, the measure of faith, the scripture says, is built into us, is permanent. And it helps us then to live our lives in such a way that we honor God. And it helps us to live more holy. Holy, H-O-L-Y, and holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y. You get that? It's so critical, I think, for us. I want to choose to live holy and honor God, but I also want to choose to live holy, fulfilled, with all that God's given me, and to see it in such a way. And I hope that you and I would find ways to live like that. So that's our word for today at the end of the week. Join us on Sunday morning at 10:15 for worship. And then I invite you to then join me again here on Monday morning at 10 o'clock. Have a great day.